World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history. Across Europe and the Pacific, battles raged with unimaginable ferocity. But among the chaos, one weapon gave American soldiers an edge unlike any other. Fast, powerful, and deadly accurate, it allowed a single infantryman to unleash a storm of fire that bolt-action rifles simply could not match. General George S. Patton himself called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. This was not just a rifle, it was a revolution. This was the M1 Garand, the weapon that changed the fate of war. The story of the M1 Garand begins in an age of turmoil. The 1,930 seconds were a decade of uncertainty. The Great Depression had shaken the United States to its core, while overseas, dark clouds gathered over Europe and Asia. Nazi Germany was rearming at a terrifying pace. Imperial Japan was expanding across the Pacific, and war seemed inevitable. The U.S. military faced a sobering reality. Its soldiers were still armed with bolt-action Springfield rifles. Reliable, but slow. Against modern armies that embraced mechanization and firepower, America risked being left behind. The Army knew it needed something revolutionary. A rifle that could deliver rapid, accurate firepower in the hands of ordinary infantrymen. A weapon that could bridge the gap between sheer numbers and modern warfare. For years, countless inventors had tried, but most designs failed too heavy, too fragile, too complex. It seemed impossible to arm an entire army with a semi-automatic weapon, but then came John Cantius Garand, a Canadian-born engineer working at the Springfield Armory. Garand was no soldier, but he had a gift for mechanical genius. Patiently, he refined his design. A gas-operated, semi-automatic rifle chambered for the powerful 30-06 Springfield cartridge. Unlike bolt-action rifles, his weapon automatically ejected the spent cartridge and loaded the next round with every trigger pull. The shooter no longer needed to break their aim or cycle the bolt. It was faster, smoother, deadlier. In 1936, after years of trials, the U.S. Army adopted his creation. The M1 Garand became the first standard-issue semi-automatic rifle in the world. For the average soldier, this was nothing short of a revolution. With its 8-round N-block clip, a single American infantryman could unleash nearly twice the volume of fire as an enemy armed with a traditional rifle. It meant fewer pauses, faster reactions, and overwhelming firepower in the chaos of battle. When war finally came in 1939, and when America entered the fight in 1941, the M1 Garand would prove its worth on every front: Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. What began as a bold experiment in peacetime would soon become the defining weapon of an entire generation. The storm of global conflict was coming, and the M1 Garand was ready. What made the M1 Garand so extraordinary? Why did generals, soldiers, and even enemies speak of it with respect, and sometimes with fear? The answer lies not in a single feature, but in the harmony of its design, speed, reliability, and sheer stopping power combined into one rifle. At the heart of the Garand was its semi-automatic action. Unlike the old bolt-action rifles, which forced the shooter to lift, pull, and slam the bolt forward after every shot, the M1 Garand did all the work itself. With each pull of the trigger, a powerful 30-06 round was fired, the spent cartridge was ejected, and a fresh one chambered, all in less than a heartbeat. To the soldier on the battlefield, this meant continuity. No broken aim, no wasted seconds, no vulnerable pauses. It gave every infantryman the ability to fire as quickly as his finger could squeeze the trigger. Its feeding system was another stroke of brilliance. The M1 used an N-block clip holding 8 rounds. Instead of carefully inserting single cartridges or fumbling with stripper clips, a soldier could slam the entire clip straight into the magazine. The rifle locked it in with a satisfying click, instantly ready for combat. And when the last round was fired, the empty clip was automatically ejected with the now legendary metallic ping. That sound became iconic, sometimes feared, sometimes mocked, but always unmistakable. For American troops, It was the signal to reload and keep fighting. Then there was the power of its ammunition. The .30-06 Springfield cartridge was no ordinary round. Heavy, fast, and lethal. It could punch through cover, drop an enemy at hundreds of yards, and still retain its deadly energy. In the hands of a well-trained rifleman, the Garand could engage targets out to 500 meters with accuracy and confidence. For close-quarters combat, the sheer volume of fire it could unleash overwhelmed enemies who were used to slower rifles. Durability was another hidden strength. Soldiers dragged their Garands through mud, sand, snow, and rain. In the Pacific jungles, it resisted rust and rot. In the frozen hell of the Ardennes, it kept firing when other weapons seized up. This reliability earned the trust of the men who carried it, forging a bond between soldier and rifle that went far beyond mere steel and wood. The M1 Garand was not without flaws. The fixed 8-round capacity meant a soldier could not easily top off the magazine. The rifle was heavier than many of its contemporaries. And yes, that distinctive ping sometimes worried troops, fearing it would alert the enemy that they were momentarily out of ammunition. But for every drawback, the rifle offered overwhelming advantages. When combined, its semi-automatic speed, powerful cartridge, robust construction, and battlefield reliability, the Garand created a weapon that was years ahead of its time. It was not just another tool of war. It was a force multiplier, turning every American infantryman into a faster, deadlier fighter. This was the secret of its power. Not one feature alone, but the perfect blend of engineering, practicality, and battlefield necessity. It was a rifle designed for war, and in the crucible of World War II, it proved unstoppable. When war erupted, the true test of the M1 Garand began. No longer was it just a prototype admired by generals and engineers. It was now in the hands of millions of young soldiers thrown into the most brutal conflict in history. From the sweltering jungles of the Pacific to the ruined cities of Europe, the Garand became both lifeline and weapon, the tool that could mean the difference between survival and death. In the Pacific theater, American Marines and soldiers faced an enemy unlike any they had known before. Japanese troops fought with fanatical resolve, often launching desperate banzai charges, screaming as they charged through the jungle with bayonets fixed. Against such human waves, a bolt-action rifle would have been too slow. One shot, a pause, then another. But with the Garand, U.S. troops could unleash rapid, continuous fire. 8 rounds could be fired in seconds, mowing down attackers before they ever closed the distance. Veterans would later recall that the Garand was the only reason they survived those terrifying night assaults. On the beaches of Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima, the Garand proved its worth again. Soldiers stormed fortified bunkers under heavy fire, and in those chaotic, close-quarters battles, the ability to fire without cycling a bolt meant everything. One Marine put it simply, "With the Garand, I could shoot fast enough to stay alive." Across the world in Europe, the Garand faced its toughest challenge against the German Wehrmacht. The Germans were equipped with the Karabiner 98 Kelvins, a highly accurate but slow bolt-action rifle, and backed by the fearsome MG-42 machine gun. In open fields and ruined villages, American troops used the Garand to keep up sustained pressure. Where German soldiers fired 1 or 2 rounds before working the bolt, an American rifleman could deliver 4, 5, or 6 shots in the same time. That difference often tipped the balance in small unit skirmishes. During the Normandy invasion, as American forces stormed the beaches under relentless machine gun fire, the Garand gave them a fighting chance to push inland. In the dense hedgerows of France, where ambushes lurked behind every corner, the ability to snap off quick, accurate shots often determined who walked away alive. And in the bitter winter of the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, Garands continued to fire even in freezing conditions where many other weapons jammed. Time and again, the Garand proved itself not just as a rifle, but as a battlefield equalizer. Soldiers trusted it, generals praised it, enemies respected it. A captured German officer reportedly admitted, "Our men fear the American rifle more than anything else." The Garand's reputation was forged not in factories or firing ranges, but in blood and fire, on the front lines of the deadliest war ever fought. For the men who carried it, it wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was hope, power, and survival. Carved into walnut and steel. No weapon exists in isolation. On the battlefields of World War II, the M1 Garand was measured not just by its own qualities, but by the rifles it faced in the hands of enemy soldiers. And against these opponents, the Garand stood apart. The most common adversary in Europe was the Karabiner 98 Kelvins, the standard rifle of the German Wehrmacht. Precise, rugged, and deadly accurate, it was descended from a long line of Mauser rifles renowned for their engineering. But the Kar 98K had one fatal limitation. It was a bolt-action rifle. For every shot, the German soldier had to lift the bolt, eject the spent casing, push it forward, and realign his aim. In the seconds it took to fire 1 or 2 shots, an American armed with a Garand could unleash half a clip. This disparity in rate of fire often turned small firefights into decisive American victories. In the Pacific, the Garand faced the Arisaka Type 99, the rifle carried by Imperial Japanese soldiers. Like the Kar 98K, it was a bolt-action weapon, designed for durability in harsh conditions. Japanese troops often used it with bayonets in close combat, relying on fierce banzai charges to overwhelm their enemies. But here again, the Garand's speed and firepower crushed such tactics. A single Marine with a Garand could cut down charging soldiers before they ever reached striking distance. On the Eastern Front, American forces who later faced Soviet weapons compared the Garand to the Mosin Nagant, another rugged bolt-action rifle. The Mosin was reliable, especially in the freezing cold, but it lacked the efficiency and speed of the semi-automatic Garand. Even the Germans, desperate for semi-automatic capability, developed the Gewehr 43, but it arrived late in the war and never reached mass production. In the end, the Garand's true advantage was not only its mechanical design but its universality. While other armies relied on a mix of bolt actions, machine guns, and submachine guns to balance firepower, the U.S. gave every infantryman a semi-automatic rifle. This leveled the playing field and often tilted it in America's favor. The Garand was not invincible. A German with a Kar 98K could still be deadly accurate at long range. A Japanese soldier with an Arisaka could still kill in close quarters. But taken as a whole, the M1 Garand outmatched its rivals, earning its reputation as the rifle that dominated World War II. Every great weapon carries not only steel and wood, but also stories, tales whispered by veterans, myths passed down through generations, and moments where the weapon itself seemed to take on a life of its own. The M1 Garand was no exception. It became more than just a rifle. It became a legend. Perhaps the most famous tale is tied to the unmistakable ping. When the last round was fired, the en-bloc clip was ejected with a metallic chime that rang out across the battlefield. Soldiers swore that enemies learned to recognize it. German troops, some said, would wait for that sound before charging, knowing the American rifleman was reloading. Others argue this was more myth than reality, since battlefields were so loud that a single ping was nearly impossible to hear. Still, the legend endured, and the sound itself became symbolic, so iconic that even today, it is instantly associated with the Garand. Another story comes from the Pacific Islands. Marines often described the Garand as their best friend, a weapon that never let them down. In the swamps, mud, and salt water that destroyed so much equipment, the Garand kept firing. One Marine recalled how, after days of combat on Saipan, he realized he had not cleaned his rifle once. Yet when a sudden Japanese assault came, his Garand fired flawlessly, saving his squad from being overrun. For him, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a miracle. There are also tales of awe from those who faced it. German soldiers captured during the Battle of Normandy confessed their frustration at fighting against Americans who could fire so quickly. One prisoner reportedly admitted, "It's not fair. Your men shoot without stopping. Our rifles cannot keep up." For the first time, the average infantryman of one army was equipped with a semi-automatic rifle, and it left such an impression that even enemy accounts turned into part of the Garand's legend. Then there is General George S. Patton's famous declaration, calling the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. Bold words, even for Patton. Yet they captured the essence of what soldiers already knew. To them, the Garand wasn't just a piece of equipment issued by the army. It was a brother in arms, a weapon that gave them a fighting chance in the deadliest war humanity had ever seen. Some stories even lean toward the mythical. Veterans would say that when you carried a Garand, you felt invincible, that its weight in your hands gave you courage. Others remembered the unique rhythm of its fire. Bang, 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 ping. That cadence, burned into memory, symbolized the American soldier's heartbeat in World War II. These anecdotes and legends transformed the Garand into more than just a tool of war. They gave it a soul, a presence on the battlefield that extended beyond its mechanics. For those who fought with it, the M1 Garand was not just a rifle, it was history itself, forged in fire, echoing through generations. When the guns of World War II finally fell silent, the M1 Garand story was far from over. The rifle that had carried American soldiers through the greatest conflict in history would go on to shape the wars and armies of the next generation. In Korea, the Garand once again proved its worth. Against waves of Chinese and North Korean troops, U.S. forces relied on its rapid firepower and rugged reliability in freezing mountains and brutal conditions. Just as it had in Europe and the Pacific, the Garand gave soldiers confidence that their weapon would never fail them when it mattered most. By the 1960 seconds, newer rifles like the M14 and later the M16 began to replace it. Yet the Garand's DNA lived on. The M14, in particular, was essentially an evolution of the Garand longer magazine, selective fire, but built on the same foundation. Even today, military historians argue that the Garand paved the way for modern assault rifles by proving that a semi-automatic weapon could be standard issue for every soldier. Beyond America, surplus Garands armed allies around the world from Europe to Asia, where they were used in conflicts long after World War II had ended. For decades, the distinct sound of its ping echoed in wars far from its birthplace. Today, the M1 Garand is more than a relic. It is a collector's treasure, a ceremonial rifle, and above all, a symbol. To veterans, it remains a reminder of sacrifice. To historians, it represents innovation. And to the world, it is proof that a single weapon can change the course of history. The Garand's legacy is not just in the battles it fought, but in the generations it inspired. The M1 Garand was more than wood and steel. It was the heartbeat of a generation. From the sands of Normandy to the jungles of the Pacific, from the frozen ridges of Korea to the parades of peace, it stood as both weapon and companion to those who carried it. Its firepower turned the tide of battles. Its reliability saved countless lives, and its unmistakable ping became the sound of freedom on the battlefield. Though replaced by newer rifles, the Garand's spirit endures. It shaped the future of military firearms, inspired modern designs, and carved its place in history as one of the greatest rifles ever made. For the soldiers who trusted it, and for the world it helped to liberate, the M1 Garand remains more than a weapon, it is an immortal legacy.